Valerie Love, Reverend Valerie Love at your service. Divine midwife of soul destiny, Christian witch, and the author of 11 books on practical spirituality. How you loving? So here this message is, this is in a series on escaping the cult. And I'm sharing with you my story about how I escaped the Jehovah's Witness cult after 26 years. From age 4 to age 30, I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And now I love sharing my journey. And it is with a specific intention, your freedom. Freedom in mind. I used to think that witnesses were just another choice of another religion. Now I know it's actually a dangerous cult of mind control, behavior control, information control, emotional control, as we know in the BITE system of control. So let's talk about the whole idea of the hierarchy in Jehovah's Witnesses. So there's a hierarchy of Jehovah's Witnesses. At the very, very, very top is what they call the faithful and discreet slave. The faithful and discreet slave, they get this from the book of Matthew, where supposedly there's a group of people that have this channel to God that can tell you exactly what God and Jesus Christ want at any given moment. They're the faithful and discreet slave. Of the faithful and discreet slave, there is a group called the governing body. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, somewhere between 12, 13, 14. When I was there, it ranged between, 12, 13 old white men that got to tell everybody what to do. Basically, that's what it is. They make up all the rules. They say what's going to go on. They live in Bethel in New York City, Brooklyn, New York City, at the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. As we know, Jehovah's Witnesses is a great big corporation. They say that they are a religion, and they have done everything that they need to do to be a nonprofit religion. However, it is high profit corporation. And I view it as a publishing corporation and, of course, real estate corporation, because they own choice real estate all throughout New York City. Especially right as you go across the Brooklyn Bridge. You can see it when you go to New York City. You go across the Brooklyn Bridge and you look to the right, and there you see the buildings. One says Watchtower, that's Jehovah's Witnesses, and the other one says Read God's Word, the Bible Daily. At least that's what it used to say when I would see it all the time going over to Bethel. Bethel is a huge campus. And it's a campus where a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses live. You have to be single to live there, or there are some Bethelites that are couples, no children allowed. So you either have single men, not single women, mostly all single men, and you have some married couples that live there, as well as the governing body that lives in Bethel. Now, what happens in Bethel? Bethel is where they make all the books from most of the world, where they make their tracts, their paraphernalia, all the things that they give out when they're coming knocking on your doors or when they're standing on the street corners. And Bethel is also where they are, it's like the dissemination place. It's where people come, they get their assignments or where they need to go, like to serve where the need is great. So sort of like a missionary, if you will, going around the world, serving different places, taking watchtowers in a way. I did that too. I went once to serve where the need was great in, it was Mississippi or Louisiana or someplace like that, where like the witnesses can't get around and knock on all the doors. So you volunteer to go and knock on the doors in the places where the regular witnesses can't get around and knock on all the doors because so many people are there and so few witnesses are there. So they'll take a place where New York City, where there's a lot of witnesses, and they'll bus them or train or whatever and send them to a place where there's not a lot of witnesses, so these witnesses can blitz the whole area, right? And get more people into the cult. So anyway, it's sort of like what I'm seeing in my third eye is sort of this festering, like a disease spreading. That's what it looks like, sort of like a cancer spreading. That's what it looks like, the cult, okay? Energetically, that's what it looks like to me. So the hierarchy. So you have the governing body. Now, how do you get millions of people all around the world to do exactly what you want them to do? You have to have them in conclaves, yes? You have to have them in groups where you can monitor them. So hence, you have now, I'm going to do you a little bit of the bottom-up structure. So now you have rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses, we'll call them, that are what we call publishers. And publishers is just required to do 10 hours a month. When I was there in proselytizing, knocking on the doors to bring more people into the cult, right? So you have publishers, and these are people who work every day, perhaps at a job, or they are mothers that stay home with the children, very much encouraged, or perhaps they are, you know, students at home with their parents, and you become a publisher. That means you have now qualified to be able to knock on doors according to witness standards. So you have publishers. Now, above publishers, you have what's called ministerial servants. Now, actually, before we go to ministerial servants, after publishers, you have pioneers. So you have a couple of different kinds of pioneers. You have an auxiliary pioneer. An auxiliary pioneer is a person who does 60 hours a month knocking on doors, getting more people into the cult. You can see that the main focus and the main whole thrust of the cult is to get more people into the cult. And they say that this is because they're following Matthew 24:14 and Matthew 28:19 and 20, where it says that Jesus gave a proclamation at the end of his life when he was about to raise into heaven. He had not yet ascended, that before he ascended, he said, Matthew 28:19 and 20, go therefore and make the disciples and baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and doing all this until I return, all the days until I return, or something to that extent. And then in Matthew 24:14, says, go therefore and make disciples of all people, you know, all nations, all tribes, and so forth. So they feel that this outreach, proselytizing, is their number one thing that they need to do. So that's how they put it in a religious context. Now, what it actually is more people into the cult, because every person that comes into the cult is a profit center. Let's face the truth. Every person, they become more powerful and more wealthier with every person that comes into the cult. So you're going to be a bigger, better cult if you have 7 million people than if you had 10 people. So hence they're into rapid expansion of the cult, right? So after the publishers, people who say they can go out more and get more people into the cult, auxiliary pioneers, 60 hours a month, 2 hours a day. Above that, and they don't really put it in a hierarchy like this, yet there is a hierarchy because people get certain privileges. They're asked to do certain things. They're viewed more favorably. All of this is subtle. It's not written. You feel it. You know it, right? Unwritten rules, I guess I could say, I'm sharing with you. After the auxiliary pioneers, you have regular pioneers. Now, is a regular pioneer? A regular pioneer is a person who does 90 hours a month. It used to be 100 hours a month, went down to 90 hours a month. 90 hours a month knocking on doors, proselytizing, 3 hours a day. If you go out on Saturday for 3 hours and you don't go out on Sunday for 3 hours, then on Monday you have to do 6 hours. If you miss 3 days, then one day you have to do 9 hours. And we used to do 9-hour days, 10-hour days, 11. Woo, I put in 10 hours today. That's like a badge of honor. I find that highly dysfunctional now, thinking about it. But back then, I put in 11 hours today. Oh my God. You don't have nothing better to do with your life but in 11 hours. Anywho, I digress. So you have the regular pioneers. Those can be men and women, mostly women. Tends to be more women than men, right? Next, you have ministerial servants. Ministerial servants are like young gentlemen in the congregation. A congregation is about 150, 160 people, a conclave of witnesses, mostly publishers, some auxiliary pioneers, some regular pioneers. You're going to have the ministerial servants, a few of those young men like 20, 22, 23, 24, that they're grooming to take over one day. And then you have over this conclave of witnesses, this 150 witnesses that will be at a particular kingdom hall, you will have 5 or 6 men who are considered the elders. One is what they call a presiding overseer. He's sort of like the president of that little conclave, presiding overseer. Next, you will have, besides the presiding overseer, you'll have sort of like a second in command. I forget what they call him. Not really like vice president or something like that, but he's kind of like assistant to the president. And then you have a third one that's kind of, so these elders, they rotate their responsibilities every year because they don't want any one elder to think he's the boss of things, because he ain't the boss of things. He's the kingpin. Well, he's not even a kingpin. He's one of the puppets, because the real kingpins are the governing bodies. So they don't want anybody to think that they have any control. And they keep saying, oh, God, you know, God and Jesus, through the faithful and discreet slave, right? So they don't want anybody to have any power. So I don't even blame the elders, because the elders are just doing what they say they're going to do, what they are indoctrinated to do, and they're puppets too. So you have the elders. Now, you also, in addition to the elders, That's all happening in this conclave of about 150 people. 160, they don't let it usually get more than 180 because they want to be able to keep tabs on everybody. So in one Kingdom Hall, you may have 3 different congregations. You might have a congregation that comes at 10 a.m. on Sundays. You might have another congregation that comes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, something like that. You might have an English congregation and a Spanish congregation in bilingual areas. So each congregation is like a unit, and they are appointed a specific territory, places to knock on doors to get more into the cult, more people into the cult. Oh, this is science. If you think they don't have it all science down, they got this thing geographically scienced to the hilt. I mean, scienced. Now, how do you make sure the congregations are each doing what they're supposed to do? Because there are these conclaves all over the place. Well, you have a visiting one that goes around to check on them every 6 months, the circuit overseer. So the circuit overseer, him and his wife, they come once every 6 months. They make their rounds to inspect everything. Let's see all your records. Let's see all your publishers. Who's your pioneers? And they welcome him, but he's really the monitor, like for the big people. Like, are y'all doing what y'all supposed to do? He's sort of like the mob boss. You know, maybe like if you go in Vegas, a casino, he's like the pit boss. Like the pit boss is not making all the money, but he's the pit boss watching all the money on the crap table. That's kind of how the circuit overseer is. So every 6 months he comes around and he goes to his circuit. So this circuit might be 10 congregations, right? So he's going to go to congregation 1, stay for a week. Congregation 2, stay for a week. Congregation 3, stay for a week. Now, usually he lives like somewhere in the middle of all these congregations, so he can easily go and check on them. And he's like the line of making sure. The circuit overseer is making sure that all these congregations are on point and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, above the circuit overseer, we need somebody to watch him too. So we have now the district overseer. And the district overseer and his wife, they always have to be married. They have to have a wife. The district overseer and his wife, they don't usually come around and visit, but you will know that the district overseer has many circuits under his authority, and he will speak sometimes at like the assemblies. So how do they put these assemblies together? Well, every 6 months you go to a circuit assembly. That means all the little 10 congregations that you're in the bigger cluster with, like a cluster of grapes, like you have your little grape, that's your congregation, and then every 6 months you're going to go to the cluster of grapes there in your circuit. And you go to your circuit assembly, and at the circuit assembly, it's like some little hall that holds like maybe 1,000, 2,000 people, something like that. And these congregations would be there for the weekend. And they'll hear from the circuit overseer and the district overseer and the pioneers and how to proselytize more and how to do this more, how to do that more, right? Then once a year, you'll go to the big district convention, and the district convention is at a stadium like Yankee Stadium or something like that in the summertime. And now you're going to have the whole district. So the district could be, I don't know, 10 circuits. So now you got all these congregations all coming together. You have thousands of people in one place, thousands of witnesses all together. Now, each of these events, they have a baptism, and the baptism is to baptize the new initiates into the cult. And in order to be baptized into the cult, the new initiates, of course, you have to go through an initiation process. I'll talk about that in another video. So that gives you an idea of the hierarchy and how 12 to 13 men can control millions of people. I tell you this so that you can be free, so that you can come out of anything that does not honor the truth of your soul, so that you can be free to live the destiny you're here to live on planet Earth. That's not of God. Do what you know you're here to do. I love you. God bless you. ValerieLove.com. Peace. Mwah!